Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my manga picks with asexual representation. So this video actually happens to be a very special one for me because this is the label that I identify with. I do label myself as a demisexual woman, but since it is a spectrum, I can sometimes lean towards asexual as well. For those of you who have watched my channel before I started the manga and anime content, maybe this comes to you as a surprise or maybe it doesn't and it just makes sense. While it did take a very long time for me to realize that I do identify as a demisexual or ace-spec woman, I do have some of my friends who are also asexual to thank for that, and some of the manga that I'm going to be mentioning in this video as well. I'm going to begin by talking about a series that's very special to me. This one was the one that helped me realize that I am asexual, that I feel comfortable with this label, and it just helped me reaffirm that I was not broken. So this is I Want to Be a Wall, which I did talk about this one last year at San Diego Comic-Con in the best and worst manga of 2022. And this is just exactly what I needed to hear. This story follows an asexual woman named Yuriko and a gay man named Gakurota, and they actually have to get married. I know, it sounds like a very far-fetched idea, an asexual woman and a gay man getting married, but I mean, due to their age, due to their families kind of pressuring them to like settle down, they kind of settled on this fake marriage, and from there, you know, developed a very nice and healthy platonic relationship. When we first meet our protagonists, they're getting married, and you can tell, you know, it just doesn't make sense. Them getting married doesn't make any sense. Yuriko is your asexual woman who's a BL fanatic, and then you have a gay man who has very strong feelings for his childhood friend. On paper, makes absolutely no sense. But to everyone else, they just have to pretend they're nervous about getting married like any other couple. And yeah, that's how we are introduced to our protagonists. I love them both. Spoiler, I absolutely adore them both. And you would think they actually like knew each other from childhood or college or whatever, but no. They were set up in one of those wedding arrangements. First date kind of doesn't go well, but then after other potential marriage partners for Gakurota also do not go well, he just kind of settles like, oh, she was kind of cool, she was the nicest one, like let's just work something with her because the family pressure is not going to go anywhere. When they get married, they're basically, these are some of their, like, not their very first interactions, but they're forced to live together. They're forced to see each other every single day, so you're just kind of seeing their platonic relationship blossom. And if you wanted to see the childhood friend that Gakurota is in love with, that's him. Just the, you know, your golden retriever character. And unfortunately for Gakurota, his childhood best friend happens to be straight and he's in a relationship with a woman, so his feelings are very much one-sided. The reason why I'm talking about this series is not because of Gakurota, although I love him to pieces, but he's a gay man. So I'm talking about this series because of Yuriko. She's the asexual woman that I really identified with, especially towards the end of volume 1 once you start getting some of her backstory, because it hit me hard. To the point that I was crying because I've had a lot of those same thoughts. But although the internet exists, sometimes you hear these labels and you're just kind of like, that can't be me. But then you come to the realization one way or another and you realize, no, that is me. So that whole realization happened to me while I was reading this. She's wondering why she's capable of consuming all these romance BL stories, but for the life of her, she just cannot fall in love. She can't understand the concept of falling in love with someone. And it's panels like these that just struck a chord with me because I've been in that exact situation. Like I did mention at the beginning of the video, I do identify myself more as demisexual. So I am capable, I'm not aromantic. I have fallen in love in the past. It's just, for me personally, extremely difficult. When you don't know your label and you're in this spectrum, you do start wondering, what is wrong with me? Am I broken? Like, you just do not know how to explain, which is like, I'm kind of struggling because it's just something that most people do not understand. As an adult woman, Yuriko gets the opportunity to study abroad in Seattle, and during a college party, she meets this guy who is bisexual and very open about it, and he's the one that actually brings up, you know, asexuality to her. And she has this awakening, like, oh my god, like everything makes sense. There's 2 volumes out for I Want to Be a Wall so far, and in volume 2 you actually see Kakurota experience some jealousy and also some misunderstanding about what asexuality is. So that college friend that told Yuriko that she could be asexual comes back and actually explains it to Kakurota. So I absolutely adore this series. I highly recommend it. And it's one that I'm gonna keep going back to and rereading it because it makes me feel so comforted and seen. Their platonic relationship is everything to me. It's super, super sweet. So yeah, definitely check this one out. Now I'm gonna move on to one of my favorite series of all time. I've actually have spoken about this before, but I spoke about it as strictly a GL, and volume 4, which is the final volume, made me realize that this is not only a GL story, it's not just a girls' love story. There's actually asexual representation, which, I mean, by the time I read the final volume, it just made sense. I'm like, yeah, like no wonder why I related to both of the characters. But let's talk about Doughnuts Under a Crescent Moon. So this is an office drama following 2, well now confirmed, asexual woman. It's still one of my favorite mangas of all time. Like I mentioned, I absolutely love this series. When I first picked it up, I picked it up because I saw a GL romance following 2 adult women. When I first started reading this, I was like, shit, I relate to Hinako a little too much. Again, with those sentiments that, what's wrong with me? Am I broken? And in the story, you do actually see her go on dates with men just because she's pressured by her mother, and her friends are worried that she's getting older and not settling down. So you do see her making that effort. Despite all the effort that she's actually putting into going on these dates, getting in these relationships with men, she just cannot force any romantic feelings. She tries to kind of convince herself, like, maybe if I say yes, maybe over time it'll get easier, but despite the fact, it just does not get easier. And it's panels like this one where Hinako is actually talking to herself in her head and telling herself that she's defective that really struck a chord with anyone who identifies as, you know, being ace-spec. Just like Hinako, I've been in situations where I've gone out with men and I know that they're nice. On paper, they seem like great people, but you can't force any romantic or sexual attraction when, you know, when you're in the spectrum. I'm just looking at panels like this, honestly, I'm getting a little bit teary-eyed. The first time I read this, I cried. The second time I read this, I cried. The third time I read this, I cried because it is just incredibly relatable. And for anyone who doesn't identify as asexual and just wants to understand how it's like for someone in the spectrum, I feel like stories like this one, like I Want to Be a Wall, will put things in better perspective. You might not be able to understand it 100%, but you might be able to be more sympathetic and more just less judgmental about people that do identify in any of the ace-spec labels. So while Hinako is having this breakdown, her co-worker Asahi spots her and decides to just have a little heart-to-heart with her, and they share a donut under the crescent moon. Wow. The title of the manga actually takes place in the manga. I love those little details, but yeah, just, you know, finally Hinako found herself someone who was willing to listen without any judgment at all. From there, the 2 women start forming a friendship because although they worked in the same office space, they walked by each other all the time. they just never actually took the time to speak to one another. Asaki, as you can see from the cover, she's more of your quiet, stoic character. And then you have Hinako, who is this beautiful, feminine girl that a lot of the office workers just kind of naturally gravitate towards. So as I mentioned, in the final volume, which is volume 4 right here, that's where you find out that both women are, they don't explicitly say they're asexual, but they do explain basically what asexuality means. And yeah, it's these panels that just made me realize, okay, I guess there was a reason why I related very, very much to both of these characters. It made me so happy because I loved the whole story. Actually realizing that this story has not one but 2 women that are asexual, finding out about this label later in life. Obviously they do get together, but not in the traditional romantic way. There's no kissing, there's no like grand, you know, over the top embrace, none of that. Like they're just happy with their companionship, just by holding hands, just by being with someone that truly understands them. So I cannot recommend this series enough. It is completed with 4 volumes. The next series I want to talk about is this guy right here. This is called Is Love the Answer? And it is a one-shot. You can see it's quite a thick one as well, which made it such an enjoyable read. So this one also follows another asexual woman. Just like with the other 2 stories that I previously talked about, there's those same sentiments about feeling broken and just misunderstood, kind of feeling like an alien just observing planet Earth, and planet Earth is like everyone else that's capable of getting in relationships normally. And then you're just kind of, you know, by yourself, just in your own, you know, kind of like this panel. The protagonist in the story is named Chika, and you follow her from high school all the way up to college. And in high school, she finds herself in a very unfortunate situation with one of her friends, confesses that he's in love with her, and actually forces himself onto her. From there, she does form trauma and just distrust in a lot of men. After the whole experience, her friends try to cheer her up by going karaoke, but even when she's surrounded by friends and they're all singing all these love songs, she just can't find a way to relate to these songs. She can't even relate to the breakup songs either. She can't get sad over this guy because she just never had these feelings. She tried to be like everyone else, but when you're asexual, as much as you want to try, you just can't force anything. And just like with the other stories that I mentioned, since we are seeing the perspective of an asexual woman, there's always that thought process like, oh, maybe if I keep talking to him, if I keep dating him, maybe I'll grow to like him. Which unfortunately isn't the case with a lot of asexual people. Once her high school years end, she decides to go to college where she wants to study psychology. And even within the psychology students, there's still a lot of stigma and a lot of judgment about asexuality. Although she doesn't know at this point that she's asexual, they kind of question her life and romantic choices and all of that. And even psychology students were kind of like, you know, maybe there's something wrong with you, maybe you need counseling. But she does meet a professor that she admires that kind of puts everything into perspective for her. This became one of my favorite panels in the story. So you have the professor telling Chika that, I mean, she came to college to study, right? Like, why isn't she questioning, you know, what is normal and what is regular instead of trying so damn hard to be normal and regular? It's stuff like that that makes you think like, yeah, maybe I should stop conforming to what society thinks is normal and just start living life the way I want to live life. Apart from the fact that Chika is such a great character and they handle explaining its sexuality so well, the artwork is absolutely stunning, and it just kind of puts a very nice visual to all the thoughts that went through my head as I was growing up, especially in my 20s after a very bad breakup. So throughout the story, you basically follow Chika's journey as she discovers all these labels and tries to find the one that is more suited towards her. She also does meet other asexual people. She meets a gay man. She also meets a girl that loves, like absolutely loves fictional characters. She doesn't really have a label. She just kind of does her own thing, but she's super, super sweet. And just having that supportive group of friends that want to know more about Chika and how she identifies herself and are willing to be patient with her as she tries to figure everything out. Like, that support group is everything. I mean, just look at this. Look at how pure this is. Not only is Chika's story super pleasant to read, but you also get to learn a lot about asexuality in this manga. Different day, but we're still going to talk about asexual manga recommendations. But before we move on, I wanted to point out something about Is Love the Answer? So I forgot to mention that there's actually male asexual representation within this manga as well. So the male student that lives with a professor also happens to be in the ace spectrum. When you read the back of the book, you actually get to see more about how each of the characters identify within the asexual spectrum. So you get to read more about Chika's asexuality. So she identifies herself more as an aromantic asexual. You can also read up on the guy's asexuality as well. So he is an alloromantic asexual that has a libido and is sex repulsed. And also the professor happens to be X-gender, aromantic asexual with no libido. If you want a lot of asexual representation in the manga, this one kind of has you covered, and it explains everything so well. It truly, like I've mentioned throughout this video, it truly is a spectrum. Also by the same mangaka as Is Love is the Answer, Isaki Uta, we have Minikun is asexual. So this is a one-shot following a male asexual. So it's actually a very short story, a very sad story about a girl who falls in love with an asexual male who happens to be her friend. And it's a pretty sad one actually, because you see a girl who's so hopelessly in love with her friend. She confesses her feelings towards him. He does have some feelings towards her. They're just not exactly the same romantic feelings that she has towards him. Despite all of that, and despite him explaining a little bit about his asexuality and the fact that he can't be in a quote-unquote normal relationship, they decide to get in a relationship, a different kind of relationship. So for her, it means compromising on those romantic feelings. So no hugging, no kissing, no hand holding. And for him, it's basically the same thing. So they're still hanging out together, they're still confiding in one another and spending all this time together, but they just mean completely different things to both of them. Where the story takes a sad turn is, since you're experiencing the story from the girl's perspective, you can see how much she loves Minikun and how much she just wants to be this romantic person and be like everyone else. You know, she wants to respect his boundaries, but at the same time, all of these emotions are just bottling up inside of her. And he can tell that she's just so disappointed with this relationship. And you might be thinking, oh, isn't Minikun being sort of selfish? Like, he knows what she wants, but he's not willing to give it to her. Well, he does make an effort to kind of understand what it is that romantic partners are looking for. He does end up reading a book, but it's just not the same. And it doesn't result in what she would like this relationship to be. So it just makes him realize that he's just not the right person for her. And despite the tragic realization that he's just not the right person for her, he's still super thankful that she fell in love with him and is so appreciative of the fact that, you know, she shared those feelings towards him. If you want a short story that has male asexual representation and dives into the complexity of what it's like for an asexual person to be in a relationship with a quote-unquote like normal person, this story certainly doesn't have a happy ending. It's definitely very complex and tricky. Like, you want to sympathize for the girl in the story, but you have to understand that Minekun's feelings are also very, very valid. I feel like if you're in the asexual spectrum, you most likely have been in some type of situation similar to Minikun. So for me, I definitely related to that. but I can see how other people might think that Minikun was just being very selfish. So if you just kind of want to put yourself in his shoes and understand what a relationship is like for an asexual person, I think this is a great read. And plus, it's just a very short one-shot, so it won't take you too much time to read. And finally, I have something that's a little bit more lighthearted. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's available in English officially. I'm pretty sure it's not. And I don't know if there's fan translations, but if you happen to speak French, then this is one that I would recommend if you don't want something super serious about asexuality. So here we have a romantic love story, and this follows a female mangaka who is used to writing shonen series, like action shonen, but since her last series was a flop, her editors are convincing her that romantic comedies are the way to go. Problem is, she's never experienced romance because she's a romantic. She has absolutely no understanding, no knowledge, and no interest in romance at all. And her editor at this manga magazine is kind of like, wait, aren't you a girl? Like, don't girls love romance? But our female lead, she is a feisty girl, very stubborn, very sure about who she is, which I absolutely loved reading. She's just kind of like, no, that's not how it works. You don't have these romantic feelings just because you're a girl. Not all girls like romance. I sure do. I love my romance anime and manga and all of that. Like, I love feeling these gushy like butterflies and all that stuff, but not all women like romance. So yeah, she's just very dumbfounded and shocked that her editor would even like assume these very misogynistic things about females working in the manga field. Yeah, just because you're a female doesn't mean that you just have to limit yourself to romance manga, but she's just kind of being told like, hey, this is what you're gonna have to do because you're a female mangaka in this space and your last series was a complete flop. Romance manga by female sell. That's basically what they're telling her. But yeah, she is so against all of this, but she also understands the business side of, you know, being a published mangaka and just has to kind of sell her soul. You know what, like her romantic comedy series, as bad as it was, and you can actually like read a little bit in the first few pages, like it's a very typical like shonen romantic comedy. Like it's just it's just not it. It definitely is not. It's not what I'm used to reading in shoujo romance, let me just tell you that. But yeah, despite the fact that she sold her soul to the devil and is, you know, kind of being forced to write this romantic comedy, it actually ends up selling really well to the point that like animation studios want to actually produce a full anime of it. She hates the fact that she even had to write this story to begin with as an asexual woman. She's also not willing to compromise her work or the characters that she wrote in her work. So one of the characters in her story happens to be a transsexual. So the studio that's going to be animating her romantic comedy series wants to change up some things, especially a trans character within her series. They actually want to make the trans character a female character because in their eyes, Yuri or GL girl on girl love sells. And our female lead is just not willing to compromise again. She just speaks up in a boardroom full of men like, no, I wrote this character as a trans character. You're not going to be erasing my trans character from my series. This is how it's going to go. If you're going to animate my series, you better do it right. It's just cool to read about someone who's so sure about her sexuality and so sure about not compromising things that are important to her. So the reason why she was so defensive about the erasure of her trans character was because as an asexual woman, she's used to people looking down on her and just being this minority. So yeah, she just explains her reasoning to one of the directors from the animation studio. This guy, who's much older than her, kind of seems to get it, or at least try to be understanding of why she was so defensive. But at the same time, he really finds her attractive because of that, and he kind of wants to make a move on her, although she makes it explicitly clear that she's not interested. And also one of her assistants happens to be very smitten as well, and he's this very quiet and kind of creepy looking dude. She nicknames him the Killer because he's just kind of creepy looking, to be honest. But yeah, he has a crush on her and just looks up to her. So our aromantic female lead happens to have not one, but two men who are very smitten. It's quite a funny read. I really enjoyed this. Definitely the least educational about asexuality, so you won't, you know, learn too much about what it means to her, but I still enjoyed it regardless. So that's it for my asexual manga recommendations. I know I sound like a broken record, but you do get to see a wide spectrum of what it is to be, you know, in the ace umbrella. Like it truly is a spectrum. I keep repeating myself, but it means something different to each person that identifies within the spectrum. So as a demisexual, sometimes leaning more asexual woman myself, I just find a lot of comfort reading about people with a similar outlook about, you know, sex and romance. So I definitely do recommend these ones. I hope you guys check it out and let me know if you have other asexual manga recommendations in the comments below. I still have a couple more Pride manga recommendation videos to put up, so be on the lookout for those. If you're brand new to my channel, make sure to subscribe to keep up with more content, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye! Happy Pride!